All right. I'd like to introduce Akbar from Logger Data. Akbar, thank you so much for coming up online and telling the story about the launch of Akbar, or sorry, the launch of Logger Data. So
Okay.
you should be broadcasting, and I will go ahead and pass over the mic to you. So thank
Okay.
you
I
very
also have
much.
slides. I don't know if how that works in terms of if people have access to those slides or they need to be uh,
Yeah, so
close
the
or
way it
what.
works is you can share it by clicking your face with the screen or with the mic,
Okay.
and then it'll
Got it.
start to share your screen,
Got it. Okay.
and I'll let you know when it's doing that. It's not there yet.
Okay. Let me go and do that. Let's see. Let's do this. Are we live?
Yes, we are live. We are good to go. Thank
Okay.
you
Hi
very
everyone.
much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Danny. Hi everyone. My name is Akbar. I am co-founder and CEO of a company called Logger Data. We've been around for a couple of years now, and this talk is not really about our company, but it's more about our learnings from doing category creation, and just what we learn, and some maybe some hopefully some things that might be helpful for some folks out there. I know a lot of you in here, especially in IoT, are you're doing brand new things, and basically inventing whole new categories of products, and it can be really hard. So I just wanted to share some of our learnings. Uh, a quick, just some background. I've actually, I've been fortunate to be involved in multiple times in my career, and in companies that were doing category creation. I was involved really early on with SolarCity. Back when the whole, solar market was really coming online, and the idea that instead of buying it, you could rent it and put it on your roof, and what that means, and monitoring all that kind of stuff. I worked really, really early on with the Juul devices. I wrote the V1 firmware, which is obviously a brand new category. Being able um, to smoke basically without cigarettes. And then I think one of the ones I was most excited about is the company I co-founded also. It's called Minna Life, and we basically worked on basically tech for sexual health, which at the time, now I think it's much, there are a lot more companies in this space. Um, but at the time there wasn't really anyone, and we were kind of the first people there, and actually a lot of learnings, and that was an especially difficult one. And then also a company called Ringley Smart Jewelry. So I've had the luck to be involved in this a few times, and there are a lot of similarities, and every time I do it, in terms of like what's hard about each one. Um, but first, like a little bit about Logger, and why I think this is why we're creating a new category for Logger. So my background, of course, is in IoT embedded systems development. And the last few years, I found myself fighting with my tools more than like actually writing firmware and creating new products. And it was really frustrating, and I had a lot of thoughts about why. So ultimately, we ended up creating Logger Data, which basically is a way to interact with real physical custom hardware, but via an API. So that if I want to, like flash my board, or open a serial port, or read an analog line, or talk over I2C or SPI, I don't actually need the physical hardware next to me. It can be anywhere in the world, and I can do everything via an API. The analogy we use is it's very similar to what AWS did for web developers back in the day, where instead of being having to build out your own server rack, interface with it and doing all that kind of stuff, you could basically spin up a server. It's still real physical hardware, but you could spin it up and interact with it over an API. So it really unlocked the ability for developers to focus on writing software and not on dealing with the physical hardware. And similar for Logger, we're basically changing how firmware development is done and how embedded development is done. All via an API, which I think most people are used to, like getting out the oscilloscope and getting out a logic analyzer and getting out your J-Link debugger and all these different things, and basically saying, okay, instead of doing all that, now it's an API. So we really are creating a new category um, in this field, but it's hard. Like a lot of people aren't used to this way of thinking, and it's there's a lot that goes into to kind of selling a product when you're doing category creation. So first I want to kind of just define what is category creation. I think this person does a very good job of defining it. And I think some examples that immediately come to mind. Uber. They fundamentally changed our interaction with ride hailing, right, and ride sharing. That's one of the more famous examples of category creation. And Spanx is another idea, like this formware, the category formware, where it's clothing, but it's a specific type. And of course the iPhone, very very famous examples of category creation. And some of the benefits of category creation are obvious. If you're creating a category and you succeed, you're basically the only player. You get to charge a lot more than if you're entering a crowded field and you're incrementally better, right? Like if I'm making an incrementally better mousetrap, yes, I can maybe charge a little bit more, but I've got a lot of competition, and there's a lot of other options. But if I'm the only player, then I can basically charge. I can charge much more than I would normally be able to charge. Um, you get to capture the whole market. Again, you're the only one there, so it's not like you're going into a crowded field and you're getting 10% or 5% or whatever. You can get really 80 to 90% of the market before your competitors start to realize, oh, this new category is real. People want this thing. I need to start, moving in. But by then, you've already captured such a large uh, portion of that category that you've got a huge advantage. You've got a huge moat around you. Um, and in terms of marketing, it's awesome because everyone comes to you. You're the thought leader in this space. You created the category. So anytime there's any kind of anything happening in this space, you're always going to come to mind. So you kind of get all these like virtuous things that happen when you do it well. But there are of course a lot of challenges to category creation. I think one thing people don't really realize is it requires a lot more capital than if you're entering is like a well-defined space, because you have to try a lot more times. There's a lot more trial and error, and you might have your gut might be right, but getting the right product market fit is just going to be harder, and you need to raise more capital. And we've been fortunate enough to so far been okay with that, but I'm glad that we have a lot more capital than a lot of people thought we needed when we started. Um, there's a lot of education, and education can be fun. It's fun to teach people new things and everything, but it really distracts from your main goal, which is finding customers and selling them selling them stuff, and making money, and also getting the right features together. Like there's typically when you're doing, especially the startup, you're a much smaller team, so you don't really have a team dedicated to just education, and on top of your core team of engineers and sales. And so figuring out how to manage that education, and not like bogging down the rest of your team is really challenging. One of the big challenges I face is that a lot of what I'm doing is just being like, hey, this is why an API for firmware, for firmware development is good, and all the things you can do, especially when people aren't used to thinking that way. And it has been a drag on our ability to do other things that we want to do. When it comes to planning, it's a lot of intuition, and from experience, intuition isn't a great way to do planning. It's much better if you've got other people who've done it before, and you've got like you can look at how other people have done roadmaps, kind of stuff. So you're kind of again going from gut, and I think everyone thinks they have good intuition, and even some of my early assumptions were really wrong, but I didn't know they were wrong. There's no one there's not some research I could do and be like, oh, that's a dumb thing to do, I shouldn't do that. I kind of had to try it out and then fail to know that, oh, that my intuition here was wrong. Um, and the one thing is, it's kind of an ego thing, is that uh, there's this famous, classic business four quadrant thing about being consensus, non-consensus, and right and wrong. And it's you kind of if you're consensus right, it's like whatever, everyone knew it, so yeah, you're right, and that's cool. If you're consensus wrong, it's like, well, we all made the same mistake, so how you can be forgiven for being wrong. If you're non-consensus right, everyone thinks you're a genius, like, oh my goodness, this person saw predicted the future, and that's where everyone wants to be. And when you're doing category creation, you tend to be non-consensus right, But also the problem when you're doing category creation, you're much more likely to be non-consensus wrong, and then you get labeled the world's biggest idiot. So there's a little bit of that too, and you just have to kind of like fight through that because you're going to get many times you're going to feel that you're non-consensus wrong and kind of doubt yourself. And that's one thing that's one of the big challenges. So anyway, so some of our learning. So again, I think the big one is if you're raising money, raise more than you think you need. If once you realize you're doing category creation, your capital demands are more, and you need to have more money. So if you think you think 1 million will get you there, raise 50% more, whatever it is, and that's been a huge help for us. And it just all goes down to you just have to try more things. You're doing more things. Like if you're in like again, if you're in an established industry, you just don't have to do education. So that's tons of hours, engineering time, just marketing time that you get back to do different things. That you're not spending on that. So raising more capital than you think, I think is a one of the big things that I've learned. I would tell anyone who's starting off. And then um, this has been a really interesting one for us. Is that when we started, a lot of people, basically our device, our platform makes it so that I can talk to hardware anywhere in the world. I can share that hardware with someone else anywhere in the world. The only thing that you need is an internet connection. Which initially there were people who said, "Okay, that's cool. Can I have an offline mode? Like, I want to be able to still use your platform when if maybe the internet goes away." And it makes sense, but it kind of didn't jive with what the future we imagine in the category we're creating, which is basically development that's based around 100% reliable and accessible internet. And so we had to, and we had other examples of this where people would say, "Hey, like, you know, this sounds cool, but can you add these legacy features? I really, really need these legacy features." And for us, we needed to learn to like ignore those people because they don't get it, and that's fine. If someday they will, we will eventually win them over. But we need to focus, especially early on, focus on the people who really do get it and aren't asking for a bunch of legacy features that that they're used to or whatever. Um, and that was a big learning for us. The other thing is, uh, figure out who your paying customers are as quickly as you can. And initially we thought our paying customers were engineers because that's who's going to use our product. But then we realized that engineers actually aren't the ones who are the paying customers; they're the users. But the paying customers were, CTOs, VPs of engineering, directors, and uh, that was a really big learning for us early on too, and it completely changed our sales model. Initially we thought we were going to be land and expand, where kind of like a GitHub model where people or Notion or Figma, or some of these other platforms where people would use it, they'd like it, and they'd bring it into an organization, they'd share it with their colleagues, and it would kind of like grow internally organic. And I really wanted to be that, but I realized what we were selling um, didn't it didn't fit properly with that model, and but it did fit with the enterprise model of, okay, we're going to CTOs and we're pitching them on shipping faster, fewer bugs, all these other things, being able to hire a distributed team, like if you're a manager and trying to figure out how to like fill open positions, that really resonated with them. So figuring out who your customers are, your paying customers are early on is also really important um, when you're doing this, because it's not obvious who that might be initially. Because again, you're kind of trailblazing here. You don't know. No one knows anything. Um, Other thing is, listen to you're gonna if you're on the right track, you're gonna have super users, people who are like who see what you're hear what you're selling, what you're creating, and they're like, yes, I get it, I love it, this is awesome, and those might not even be the people that end up eventually like you grow with. They might maybe be the wrong kind of company. Maybe they love your product, but their company is a smaller company or in a slightly different field. But those early users are still awesome because they're going to give you a lot of good feedback because they're also passionate about what you're making, and they've helped us prioritize features. There's a lot of features that I think are important, again based on my intuition, but then going and talking to some of my our super users, um, and listening to them, it's like, okay, they do get it. They're not asking for legacy features or this and that, but it's interesting to hear what is most valuable to them in their day to day. And when we started listening to them more and and elevating those on our priority list, it actually made them use the product even more, right? It makes sense in hindsight. But it also helped us get other users who said, oh, like, cool that you have this thing, and that we only built because this other super user told us to use it. So it kind of has this positive feedback cycle. So yeah, like it's good to have strong instincts and be confident in your own vision. But I think identifying people who believe in you and then listening to them, and don't just think that only the right path, was really important. Um, so yeah, education is important, and you're going to do a lot of education when you're doing category creation. But it can be really, I mean, it's so time consuming. Writing blog posts, writing creating videos, all that kind of stuff. So figuring out what the right mix of that is for us personally, I love webinars. They're actually fairly quick to put together. And the nice thing about webinars is you get immediate feedback, right? Because you're in a room with other people who are asking questions. So you know what's resonating, what's not, what's working, what's not, versus like a blog post or video. You can put it out there, but you don't really know, like, yeah, you can see how many people, maybe okay, if you release a video and it gets a million hits, then you probably have some feedback that it's people like it. But early on, you're not going to get a million hits. You're going to get 10, 15, 20, maybe 100. um and you just don't know what was or wasn't working. Same with, like, if you're doing a lot of writing, whereas for us, webinars were great because of that immediate feedback. And if it was a good webinar, it's still, you can turn it into a great YouTube video. um so yeah, so that was another thing. And then this was an important one for us, is that really be ignorant on who you think your competition is, because really your competition is not an established player. It's the status quo and inertia. It's people not wanting to change their ways, and not wanting and being slow to learn a new way to do things. It's your again it's like, it's almost like your competition is the time to run out of money. um, not someone who's going to see what you're doing and do it better, or not someone who's creating some new feature. Like, there are people who early on we thought were maybe competitive, but just because they had a faster debugger or something, that was not they weren't really in the space of API based development. So learning to, like, ignore them. Eventually they will, people, if you're successful, will see what you're doing, and they, have real competition. But early on, really your competition is inertia. So don't really, like, be too worried about what everyone else is doing. um and then finally, like with anything, believe in yourself. I'm wrong all the time, so if I'm wrong about you know log or data, it'll be a real bummer. I'll be really sad for a bit, but whatever. But if I'm right, I get to do something really cool. And but again, like, almost weekly, I think, like, no one else is doing this thing. Am I doing something dumb? Did I misread? Am I not thinking this through? So really, really believing in myself, and my team, and saying, oh, no, like, this is we should be doing this. This is important, because it's really hard. It's much easier to make a better mousetrap than to completely create a new product category. So definitely, worst case, you're wrong, and maybe the internet makes fun of you for a little bit, but that's not really that bad compared to what you might accomplish. So anyways, yeah, that's what we've from a few years of making Logger. Hope that helped a few people, and happy to chat more. It seems like we've still got 10 more minutes. I went through this a little quick, so happy to chat more if anyone's interested in chatting.
Hey, thank you so much, Akbar. I really appreciate it, and that's it's really cool to hear like the challenges of creating categories. And I understand how that works with your product specifically. And if anyone would like to check out Akbar's booth, please do. It's right on the left. And thank you so much.
Check it out.